local to global, building and scaling games for global audiences. The speakers are Sreekant Lanka, Telangana Government T-Hub, Roby John from Supergaming, Afsar Ahmad from Gameberry Labs, Oliver Jones from Bombay Play, and it is going to be moderated by Chirag Shangani of Google Cloud.
All right, thank you so much. You heard in the last session two sides of global gaming. One is what categories really work and what countries really give you money. And second is how do you develop faster and launch faster and scale faster. So we thought this panel would be helpful to probably hear directly from people who have already done it. We'll cover two topics. I'll introduce myself. We'll do a quick round of introduction as well. And then we'll cover two topics. One, building games with global appeal. And two, overcoming challenges and scaling the games that are currently in India at global level. And we'll hear from people who have already done it. Quick introduction. I lead the GTM for Google Cloud for Media and Gaming. My name is Chirag Shangani. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'll let everybody introduce yourself. Roby.
Hey guys, my name is Roby John. I'm the founder and CEO of Supergaming. Made games like Mass Gun, Tar Conquest, Battlestar, City Royale, and now our game Indus. Run a 150% game studio based in Pune, India.
Hello, my name is Sreekant Lanka. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the IT Ministry for Government of Telangana. Been an entrepreneur in the past, worked in different roles, currently working for the government right now.
Hello, my name's Oliver Jones. I've been living and working in India for about 13 years, worked at Zynga, done 2 startups, co-founder of Moonfrog Labs, and now Bombay Play. You may have played some of our games, including Teen Patty and now it's Card Party at Bombay Play.
Hi everyone, my name is Afsar Ahmad. I'm the co-founder of Gameberry. Usually you will have played Ludo Star or Parcheesi Star. These are the flagship games of Gameberry. We have around 350 million downloads and 25 million MAUs, and our games are played across the world in at least 13-14 countries with have significant amount of DAUs. We are a 300 people team in Bangalore. Good to be here.
Thank you, thank you. Why don't we start with Roby, you? You've always built for global audiences, right? Mass Gun, massive followership. And now Indus, you are bringing an Indian context for a global audience. So what are some of the lessons and learnings for building games for global appeal?
I think I'm an old game studio, which means that I was building in 2013 as well. Back then, India did not have a market. So the only option was to kind of build globally. We were building a shooter on a touchscreen device. People used to laugh at us. Ki touchscreen pe shooter kaun kelega 2 thumbs ke saath? Which is why we kind of chose to build for a global audience. Started by launching the game in Australia and New Zealand back in 2016, 2017. Kept opening out more countries as we needed more CCU. Learned from our players, essentially. Back then, nobody in India was playing shooter games as much, and we don't have a large PC audience. So essentially, stalked everybody on Facebook, made friends with them, got feedback from them, and kind of adapted the game to kind of suit a global audience. India was the 37th country that we launched in, and then we launched globally after that. In 2019, we launched to the top 10 worldwide on shooters. So that was the Mass Gun journey. Now when we looked at making a shooter, making it for the world, we kind of felt what is missing inside of it. At Mass Gun, we would celebrate Diwali worldwide. And players would kind of message us and ask us, hey, Roby, what's Diwali? And we would say Festival of Light and kind of explain all of it. And we thought that that's a great way to kind of talk about your art and culture. Once you build a great game, the focus kind of then comes into what's your differentiator, what's new that you're bringing to that market. Today we have 300 to 500 million gamers in India. Games are an expression of your art and culture. Found that missing, which is why we decided to kind of choose this Wakanda for India theme with what we're doing inside of Indus, to kind of bring something that gamers had not seen, which is Indian art and context, emotes, and brought it all around the world and express it in an authentic fashion. Saw great reception. We're about 15 million pre-reg worldwide across regions, but more than half of that is abroad, where people have never kind of heard about us till now. That's kind of been our approach in terms of thinking about global always. I think what doesn't change, whether it's local or global, is the authenticity that you bring to your art and kind of expression, and that's really how we think about our games.
Superb. I like the idea of connecting with your users on Facebook and getting the feedback and all. Thank you.
I think Facebook doesn't allow as many friends now.
True. All right, over to you, Afsar. Gameberry Labs found success by launching, very classical board games, Ludo, Pachisi, and scaling it to mobile, global audiences. And, congrats to you. You've gone to so many countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, one for within Asia, but even Spain, Morocco, Colombia, and all. In your view and with your lessons, what advice would you give to Indian gaming developers today on how can they build for this global audiences?
I feel at the end, when you're building for a global audience, the quality of game is the paramount thing. You can make mistakes here and there. We have made a lot of mistakes in localization. Very basic localizations. I think we have made terrible mistakes there. But people are okay with that. If the experience of the game fundamentally is great, and I take Parcheesi Star as an example of it. Parcheesi Star, there was no other game in the market which was offering purchase experience in an online version, which was this good. And I think that was fundamentally important for players. So at the end, if your game quality is good, if your game is working multiplayer in a multiplayer setting really, really well, if it can operate while traveling on a metro, if it can operate while traveling on the backseat of a car, I think you have a great experience. And if you can deliver that experience, I think that is the most important thing for players. And if you're doing that well, make mistakes here and there, nobody cares.
Perfect. Oliver, to you, Bombay Play is building hyper-social games, connecting so many people, right? What are some of the key factors that you think should be considered in game designing? And, a lot of people will, kind of gain from your knowledge, especially when you have to make it culturally relevant and also engaging for players from different regions and different backgrounds.
That's an interesting question, but I would like to say first that play is more of a universal language. So there are language barriers that exist, but when you create a social game, really those barriers break down and people can connect in a more fundamental way. And that's what we're trying to do with this sort of hyper-social sort of design approach, which makes it very easy for people to just jump on a table and invite their friends at just as few taps as possible and not have to go through sort of all the other steps like Facebook login or Google login, and just make it as easy as possible. That's what we found really worked in India at Moonfrog with our games like Team Patty, etc. And that's where we got a lot of the organic growth. And at Bombay Play, we really thought there is an opportunity to take this sort of idea global because people like playing together anywhere, right? And I think it's particularly in the environment where user acquisition costs are so high. Play is a way to also, getting people to play together is a way to also undercut that. So when it comes to cultural relevancy, we follow the design approach of just trying to be universally, sort of not alienate, actually. We take the other approach of just trying to be universally appealing, you'll see that in, we take more of a scientific approach to that, to be honest, wherein we are running, even before we make the game, we'll run a lot of ads which are testing the style of the game, just to see where the click rates, what they look like globally, before really finalizing on one thing. So, you'd be surprised what the differences can be across borders when it comes to art style, and you really have to hone in on something that, it kind of hits the sweet spot. So I would say finding, being sort of not culturally alienating, by using a scientific approach in your sort of your art style and your game design sort of strategy.
Interesting. Scientific approach to game design. That's quite interesting. Sreekant, over to you. You've operated at global levels and you've been a founder as well. Now, with being a chief strategy officer for Government of Telangana IT, what are some of the things that government is doing to kind of stimulate and support the Indian gaming developer ecosystems to build games at a global level and compete at a global level?
So I'm going to speak specifically about Telangana per se, not necessarily the government of India because I have more context here. So as most of us know or have seen here, the IT sector in Telangana has been continuing to grow over the past, I'd say 20 odd years with different levels of growth, and with emerging technologies coming in, there's a need, if you will, for pivoting in terms of how you think about some of the stuff. The session previously kind of highlighted changes that are coming about, if you think about AI, if you think about some of the other things that are happening. But I'll talk about two, three things that we know we are doing in the Telangana government, specifically to support. Just as context, I was speaking to one of the organizers, and I realized that we have around 50 odd gaming companies in Telangana itself, and that's a good start, but that's something that needs to be scaled up. So one of the initiatives that we have from the government's perspective is something that we're calling as Image Hub, which is an incubator, if you will, for gaming and multimedia and all of that ilk. And that's something that's it's going to come up close to the Telangana hub, that's the T-hub that's there in high-tech city itself. That kind of will provide a space in terms of the whole ecosystem that's required for gamers, for companies who are looking at setting up. And I'd invite anybody who's here and who's not necessarily in Hyderabad to come have a chat with me. More than keen to understand what might be the reasons that you're not necessarily here, because that's something that I am doing, I'm very active at, and I definitely see value in it. The second bits, if you will, are something that folks here locally know that the government has been pushing, called the AI City, which kind of is an initiative to connect across the ecosystem various things around compute power that's required, technology that's needed, also data sets that are required, frameworks that are required to build out newer initiatives in gaming. And towards that, large companies, even small startups, are all coming into place. We have an incubator in T-Hub itself called Math, which is our machine learning and artificial intelligence accelerator. So there's a center of excellence there. So that's helping out startups who are working in that. And more recently, day before yesterday, we were in a session with some of the few founders in T-Hub who are working specifically around gaming. And there is a push, if you will, to see how can we get the best of from a technology perspective, from a access perspective, from a compute perspective, to help with driving some of these initiatives. So there is definitely a push towards supporting, incubating newer gaming companies in Telangana. Happy to have a discussion more so in detail, but it again is dependent on what might be the specific needs for each company. But at an overall level, there are initiatives that I spoke about at a broad brush, which are working towards helping that drive.
Fantastic. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. We spoke about building games globally. How do we take a scientific approach? How do we capture and build nuances and address audiences? Also spoke Afsar. So Afsar, to you, now we switch gears to how do we overcome certain challenges in scaling games globally, where the games are already there probably in India, and we want to scale globally. And one of the key challenge, I believe, is how does Indian gaming studios compete with gaming studios globally, which have deep pockets, like billions of dollars of funding? And I know Gameberry Labs has, not raised external capital, but what's your recommendation for this gaming developer studios on raising funds or not raising funds, or how do they compete with these global giants?
Very tricky question. So I think the best method that I found for competing in an international space has been that you don't pick a space where there is a lot of competition. And I'll probably take example of Oli itself. I mean, Oli, they have built Card Party. If you look at Card Party, there was no other card, Uno similar to Uno, a Card Party social game which was present in the international market. And that's a great place to jump in, because there is a white space already there. even if you feel that there will be people who would like to jump in that space, there will be people, but lesser number of people. But if you want to build a match 3 game, of course, I mean, you're getting into a very, very red ocean. So I think blue ocean strategy where you see lesser competition is a good way of getting into it. And if you are good enough, I think what happens later on is your games tend to spread across. And it's when you start, you see maybe this category has, what, 2 million downloads a year. But maybe if you're doing it really, really well, this category expands, and that happens continuously. In Parchis, for that matter. I mean, when we started, that whole category had like 1 million downloads in a year. Now that whole category has 50 million downloads in a year. So the expansion of category is also possible when the product is out there, which is offering things, which is helping it expand. So you're creating new use cases. Why are people playing on metros? Why are people playing at home suddenly? Earlier they were not playing it. So I think that helps in expansion. So I would say try to find more blue oceans where you don't have a lot of competitions. If you go and compete against the likes of Royal Match, 100% you're going to die.
Interesting. So blue ocean strategy, finding the white space, and then category creation, having the patience such that it expands and scales gradually. Great. Sreekant, a large part of your career you've dedicated for digital marketing and performance marketing and publishing, etc. A key challenge that Indian gaming studios face is how do you scale globally in terms of user acquisition, engagement, and measurement? Where to spend how much? How do you measure? How do you scale the user acquisition across countries? What would be your advice based on your experience?
So I like the blue ocean narrative because I studied under Professor Kim in NCR. But coming back to this, the key thing is understanding few bits, right? Like as Ashraf was mentioning, how do you think about your audience? How do you think about building out categories? So the way I look at it from a marketing lens is understanding your audience and understanding their expectations, their time that they're willing to spend. There are different lenses that you look at in terms of what is important for them. And having a very, very deep understanding of that audience is going to be key in that space. And as you think about gaming, what dynamics or what attention span do Gen Zs have versus Gen Alphas have is completely different than what I might have per se. And those are dynamics I'm sure most of the gamers here who have done it well understand it, but that's a reminder for a lot of people to think about it. And from a marketing perspective, understanding that user experience from an end-to-end, what is it that they are looking at, be it in the metro, be it in the back of a cab, where is it that you're going to be playing, what is your form factor, and all of that are going to be important as you think about it. The second one, especially as you look at downloads, as you look at how do I start monetizing, how do I start looking at valuations and all of that bits that come into play, cost of acquisition becomes very important. And CACs are, you don't necessarily want to pay money for acquiring customers. You want it to be organic enough for that you download those. But sometimes you start paying some of it in a different way, whatever those ways might be. Understanding your CAC, understanding that in the context of what is your subscriber base to look at it with vis-a-vis your valuations, and how do you then factor that in? Do you want to spend your startup money, if you will, which might be too early in your stage to start acquiring customers, or where are you in that journey? And leveraging some of the free tools that are there across the spectrum is a key driver, that consideration that people have to think about. But fundamentally to all of these, especially as you're in a digital world, measurement becomes important. And how do you measure across all of these spectrums? Classic marketing, people did more right brain as opposed to left brain, but now as you're starting to think about it, right brain in terms of that measurement strategy from various bits of engagement, various bits of acquisition, what is that looking like from an end-to-end will be a key driver of how you start thinking about new users, acquisition costs, and all of that bits.
Cool. Taking ahead from there on measurement, Roby, for you, how do you now, obviously you referenced that earlier, you captured it through Facebook Connects, etc. But how do you now capture user behavior, user feedback, and how do you then deal with biases and cultural nuances from users or players from different regions? How do you do that?
So I think key parts of the lesson when we were learning earlier was that we used to get polar opposite feedback between, let's say, Europe and Latin America. We had to keep building, understand what those biases are, figure out a middle ground sometimes, because it's one game, it's not a different game. And what we kind of learned over a period of time is that we learned how to accommodate that feedback. We learned how to kind of think about it. Somewhere, it might be an emerging market, the art style needs to be more realistic. But in a established, mature market, the art style is more stylized. Accommodating these is kind of one way of thinking about it. But I would say that largely gamers are seeing beyond these base biases, and they're trying to understand like what is the experience that you're trying to give them. Ensuring that you're communicating that centrally became the clue. In case of Masgun, it was like a quick pick up and play shooter. Once we kind of build that community, I want to kind of build on what Afsar said, which is, build blue oceans. In our case, we chose a slightly different strategy. We actually said that, sure, it's a red ocean, but it's the largest red ocean that we can jump into. But we chose this whole category of genre mastery. We'd invested 10 years of our life building shooters. It was there in our, DNA. That's the entire team. And I think sometimes you go with your team as kind of being a proxy for figuring out each one of these markets. And that's really what we succeeded in doing, in kind of building people who are just crazy about guns and mechanics. You've come to our office, so you've seen a little bit on how crazy we are about guns. And that's kind of what reflects probably in our product as well. But what we also saw is that, I've made many games before. I made 50 games or so before I made a shooter. In all my 50 games, I had to have a tutorial. Okay. But when I made a shooter, it never needed a tutorial. People exactly knew what they needed to do inside of it, and they started playing. Indus also doesn't ship with a tutorial. We think that people understand these things natively. What you need to culturalize figure out is you want to be careful about it not being offensive, let's say. You want to be a little careful of those edges, which is sometimes the tricky part inside of it. The way that we've done it now, in the early days, we would just have, community players in each region who would tell us, like, okay, this is appropriate, this is not. Those kind of became our strong community. We have, 25 of those players in our Slack who we can talk to every day. And today we've got maybe a 100K Discord community that is embedded, that gives us feedback across the regions. The last part is also from a fundraising perspective. Obviously, we've raised money, but what we've done from a fundraise perspective is to raise money from partners who bring in more than the money. Knowledge, nuances, each one of these regions. For example, we've got a large esports player in Brazil who's an investor in us. So it became very easy to kind of understand that market, launch locally, get those insights. That's something that we kind of did there. Did something in Philippines similar to this. And that's really the way that I think about using your partners' networks, using your community to kind of help you bridge those biases has kind of been the way that we think about it.
Cool. A lot of good learnings here. If I have to summarize, standing to the core, communicating it well to different audiences, and then building communities to just ensure that you take care of the sensitivities and remaining true to the core then. All right. Oliver, to you next. What are some of the social gaming trends that you are observing? Like what are the different player preferences in social games, hyper-social games, and how do you take care of that in your gaming design and gaming, scaling your game to global audience?
This is a very qualitative sort of question.
Yes.
It's not as scientific as I and my team would like, but you see the data that you get, and there is a different sort of profile of user that you see, like if you're acquiring users in, say, Japan versus Brazil versus US versus India, you see these different monetization and engagement profiles, but it's very difficult to sort of bridge that gap of like, why is it like this? Why are people churning? And I would agree with Robbie here, like, well, at least Robbie's done a great job of like pre-launch, but pre-launch there's also some playtesting services that you can use if you don't have that ready-made community or people who playtest your game, like VCs who have that sort of community already that they can give to you. But using those playtesting services, we got really great sort of insights where we got focus groups in different regions to test our game and give us like audio feedback. And I mean, nothing beats actually really making a graph of who your ideal user is and what they kind of like other than games. So, for example, what is their favorite musician? Okay, is it Taylor Swift? Then you got to go to a Swiftie concert, I'm sorry, and go and get them to play your game. And that's actually a great hack, by the way, if you've not tried that already. And so that's only so doing it in person gives you the sense of how, in the case of social games, how do people play when they're with other people, and how sort of legible is your game? I think legibility is rather an understated quality of like all top games. Like again, Robbie, I'm leaning on you, but like with shooters, it's very legible. You point and click, and people die. It's very easy to understand. And puzzle games have a particularly difficult problem with legibility, especially when it's a denser puzzle and somebody watches over somebody else's shoulder. It doesn't quite make sense, and it becomes alienating. But if it looks attractive, then that's when you get the K factor of the social network. Now, interesting things we've observed, I'll just drop a few. Like we found that in the East, social gaming, how can I put this? We learned this in a project we did for Pokemon actually a while ago, and we made like a social PvP Pokemon game. And we found that Japanese users did not like using their profile pictures. They were shy, in other words. They didn't want to use their real names, but they liked the social experience anyway. Whereas we found in the West, it's about my identity. So that really informed our game design in like when we were trying to make broadly appealing games. Just let people be as social as they want to be. Don't force anything upon somebody else. And yeah, so and we found that like from a I think marketing standpoint as well, just like iterating. I think one of our advantages here is I would recommend this for any gaming startup, but your marketing team almost needs to be as big as your gaming team if you're a self-publishing studio, and you need to be running experiments in all of your key sort of demographics to figure out like how can you cater your strategy to each individual market and really maximize the sort of top of the funnel in each geo. And then your sort of, beyond that, your product management team is trying to optimize everything else down the funnel.
Perfect. So we captured 4 different sets of challenges, right? We captured the capital challenge, we captured the marketing, user acquisition, engagement, measurement challenge, we captured the user feedback challenge, and then also the social trends. Now I'm going to do a quick round in the interest of time. Afsar, you've also experimented, taking ahead the cue from Oliver's statement of experimenting in different regions. You've experimented with different genres, business-based, bankrupt as a game, dress-up games, etc. What learning do you can share from these experiences with the game developers here? When to start, when to scale, when to stop? Any learnings from your experiences that they can do?
Probably one of the games that we are building right now is a puzzle game, Match Star 3D. And it's a very popular genre that has evolved recently, very recently. Probably I'll take a leaf from the experiments that we have done over there. I think what we have learned is that the monetization in your first few days, in first few sessions, have to kick in, which otherwise when you think about building a game, you start to feel maybe I'll monetize on the day 4th, day 5th. But if you want to scale your marketing campaign, you have to monetize in second session itself. And majority of your players who are going to spend a lot should ideally get monetized in your second session itself, if not the first one. First is good, but second is the right point for that. I think that is something that I probably would say to people, that if you are not monetizing the second session, probably you are missing out and you will not be able to scale up your campaigns. Look back at your campaigns, look at the second session, what is happening, try to optimize that would be very helpful.
That's great insight. Robbie, what role does partnership and collaborations with players influence? You've already touched upon a little bit, but influencers, more particularly because I see you are doing great work with influencers with Indus as well. What role does that play for scaling your game globally?
I think 2 parts of the influencers, what we've learned, do grassroots, but also do top of the funnel large influencers who essentially have the audience's attention. They're just amplifying what your base message is. So they're kind of saying what you're saying, but maybe in a way that their audience understands it better. which is really why we've chosen influencers to kind of tell our story better than maybe even we can to an audience that understands it really well when explained in that fashion. I think that's the best way to scale something. And I think that's also because that's the viewership change, right? All kids are now consuming content just off social or YouTube specifically. So that's the channel that we wanted to use to kind of reach these audiences, which is why we kind of use influencers.
Cool. Oliver, from your perspective, how do you build community, social communities? Are there any specific inputs on you? How do you build those social communities which helps you scale the game?
You need to give your players even just the means to connect outside of the game. And I don't think a lot of, it doesn't, I think for game teams, especially those that are data-driven, it may not make sense to put like, let's put a Facebook group link in our game. Your PM will ask, what's the KPI? You know, is it driving retention? Is it driving revenue? Like these folks are already, I'll just talk about the other side, the arguments you'll face, but also why you should do it. So the arguments you'll face is, like these folks are already highly engaged. So giving them a community does what exactly? Like they'll play regardless whether they can connect with us or not. And also sometimes, like if you're A/B testing, if you're in an early stage A/B testing, like core parts of your game, what if the players talk? That's not great. So these, however, we've seen I think during the Wordle craze, Bombay Play, we spun up a Wordle game on Facebook, and it was native to Facebook, and it was daily word puzzle, not Wordle. But we made a small community there, where like through the Facebook API, you can create like a Facebook community, and even since we sort of we sort of surfaced that quite decently and that I would say that's the key way you build a community. By the way, it's through the game. It's not like paying to acquire users in a community, then trying to cross-sell your game. That's rather inefficient funnel. It really has to be through your core game itself, and it has to be surfaced to the players who are, it's a relevant sort of CTA for sort of highly engaged people. That's what my recommendation would be. And just to touch on the benefits, like that daily word game that we since stopped supporting it, but that community, which is about 10, 20,000 people, keeps going, and it's really they entertain themselves. They post their own Wordle puzzles, and the game still drives like good free cash for our business, and that's purely community driven. So yeah, I would recommend doing it. For the very, very long tail, if your LTVs are sort of measured in years, then absolutely. I think the ROI is there, and that's what you should tell your product team.
Perfect. Last parting thoughts from you, Sreekant, especially when you've helped so many companies grow globally. What are the pitfalls that can be avoided when you go global from India?
So a couple of things, right? The way I think about it is getting your foundation right, or fundamentals right, monetization and such. Getting your monetization strategy as sound as possible is going to be important. And from a startup or from a gaming company perspective, don't chase money if you don't need it. This is counterintuitive to some people, but a lot of people are just quickly chasing valuations or chasing money. It's not necessarily needed. You want to build what is core to you and then expand on that. And the third one, as we look at scaling, reflecting on some of the stuff that the Google team presented, it's about being nimble for the market that you're trying to go into and the audience that you're looking at, because what might be relevant for the India context might not necessarily be relevant if you think about it from a China context or from a US context. And then understanding that and being nimble and leveraging tools, software, whatever that is available to customize it to make it much more quicker and reduce your time to market, if you will, is going to be the key ones.
Thank you. All right. We are little over time, so I'm not opening up for Q&A, but we all are available here with your permission for any questions to take. Thank you so much. Hope everybody got a few tidbits. We covered broad topics, overcoming challenges, building games for global appeal, and then final parting thoughts. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.